It's always fascinating to see what the next big influence in motorcycling will be. We've had Hollywood movies, megastar racers, and even social trends affect how we see and how we interact with motorcycling. And the long way around didn't initially feel like something that was going to change motorcycling the way that it did. After all, it was two Hollywood film stars with a fairly ordinary history in motorcycling and an overblown off-roader with a great big air-cooled twin in it. Didn't initially feel like something that was going to change the way that a sports bike-obsessed Britain saw motorcycling, but it did, and this bike played a huge part in that. Charlie Boorman and Ewan McGregor's Round the World Trip TV show was so well produced. It was entertaining, it was informative, but it was also relatable as well, because they weren't kind of top level motocross riders or ex-Dakar guys. The fact that they took these bikes and went around the world and, okay, with a support crew, which a few people always like to nitpick, at the end of the day they still had to do it. They weren't helped through things. They had to ride through bogs and rocks and all these other challenges. And that was something that was really inspiring in a way. At the time, we were still wearing one-piece leathers everywhere, and bike meets were full of GSXRs, R1s, race leathers, knee slides, all that stuff. It opened our eyes to a new way of motorcycling. And even if you didn't go and sell all your worldly possessions and clear off around the world on one of these, it opened your eyes to the possibility of exploring and enjoying the world on two wheels in a different way. And that's really why we chose the R1150GS Adventure as our most influential bike between the years of 1995 and 2004 in the MCN's 70-year history. So we're going to delve a little bit more into why we think this bike is such a big influence and why it's so important and why we still love it.
2025 marks 70 years since MCN first went on sale, so we're celebrating this milestone by picking the best and most influential bikes from every decade that we've been rating and reviewing bikes. This is the fifth decade in the series, from 1995 to 2004. We've borrowed this bike from its current owner, Stuart, who's kindly let us play on it for the day. But this bike has a really interesting story and actually went around the world back in the day. So we're going to head off, take it for a little ride and go and meet the original owner, Brendan, and find out a little bit more about his trip and how he got on with this GSA.
So I'd like to thank Motul for sponsoring this Bikes of the Year 70th anniversary series. Now, they've got a whole range of oils for everything from 50cc scooters up to big air-cooled bruisers like this GS. If you're a little bit confused about what you want, you can go on their website and they've got a handy tool on there that helps you pick through all the different kinds of oil and get exactly what you need for your bike. Thank you again to Motul. So we're here with this particular GS's original owner, and obviously we've been talking about the more famous GSA around the world trip, but this one has been on a real one with Brendan. So I think we start with why you decided to go around the world, because that's not an everyday decision. So tell us where that thought came into your head from.
I had a very good family friend who, along with his wife, they had ridden down to Australia, and they'd survived that, and I thought, well, I reckon we could do something similar. And I had the advantage in having a Ukrainian wife,
Right.
who was fluent in Russian, and can manage a smattering of Polish, and she's got a degree in German.
So I can see on here the route that you took, but run our viewers through.
Okay, well, firstly, we decided that we would travel west, because other people had done travelling to the east, and one of the things that they noted was the sun being in their eyes and things like that. And I thought, well, I'm an early riser, we'll go the other way. The other reason for going in a westerly direction is, of course, the weather. Predominantly it comes at you from the west, and I'd figured that if it really turned bad, all we had to do was stop and the weather would go past, and that worked out very well for us. And then choice of bike as well. The gossip is, don't touch the new BMWs, right. You want the old ones. So you did a trip at the start of 2008, so kind of just as these were about to run out and the new 1200 had come in. This is the last of electronic or non-electronic ones.
Yeah. And there's a little story with that as well, isn't there, that you went to look at the 1200 as well?
Yes, and it was, how do you turn the headlight off? You can't, sir, it's a feature. Yes, but if I'm going across Siberia, do I really want to be lit up like a Christmas tree?
So, how many miles did you do?
It was nearly 17,000.
And how did you get on? There's a few battle scars on the left-hand side, so
Yes.
that tells one tale, but mechanically, how did it fare?
Mechanically, it was flawless. It had one bit of a hiccup in Vladivostok, where I just think it didn't want to play for the day. Other than that, it was fine.
And in terms of prep, obviously we can see you've got the luggage and the bars. Are there any other little bits and pieces that...
Well, silly little things like, putting a light on the bars so that it shines into where the headlights fit. Right. You could see where things were, so if I did have to change a light bulb, I could see what I was doing. People sort of say, what did you put that there for? I did do a very thorough service on the bike myself, so that I knew the difficult things, brakes and stuff like that, so that there weren't too many surprises on the trip. And if we had a puncture, which of course we did, at least I knew what I was doing.
Because you were two up as well with your wife, so...
Two up, and with no support crew, we managed all the way, in Japan, filling with fuel. That was rather like a Formula One pit stop, because a crew would come out, a cloth placed over the tank, they would carefully fill. It was wonderful. Russia was a wee bit different.
Yeah, I can well imagine. Yeah.
And that led to one of the preparation things that we did. Having watched The Long Way Round, there was an episode where Ewan got fuel in his eyes from a Russian filler. What we did, I've actually made the filler hole in there larger, so that the large fillers that they've got in Russia could fit in.
And it doesn't blow back.
It doesn't blow back. One of the little tricks in Russia, a lot of the places you go and buy fuel, but you have to prepay, which is okay, fair enough, but you also have to say how much you want. Well, when you're wanting to fill the tank right up, you want to brim it. So you're making a bit of a guess. So you say, I'll have 30 litres, because this will hold 35, and that's what they sell you. Pump doesn't stop.
Okay.
So that was exciting.
Kind of give me two or three of the highlights. What was kind of the best experience that you had with the old girl?
The scariest moment was when we slithered down a Russian road that was liberally coated in oil, and the bike quietly laid down on its side, and we just kept on going. That was a little bit worrying. We both survived it, stood the bike up, and it was fine. We weren't, but that was probably the most upsetting episode.
Yeah. And what was the high point?
There were so many of them, it's difficult to pick one of them. Japan is an amazing country. They drive on the same side of the road as us, and people are so polite. One of the high points was we'd misplaced a camera. We went into a motorbike shop and asked with a phrase book, where can we buy? And the chap more or less took us by our hands to a camera shop. I mean, such courtesy, such politeness. It was wonderful.
After meeting Brendan and hearing his tales riding this bike around the world, I really want to get to grips with his old GSA and find out how it holds up 20 years later.
Today is actually the first time I've ever ridden an air called, well, 1150 and 1100GS. So I've ridden the later 1200s and then the 1250s and 1300s from there, but when this old, it's my first experience, and I'm pleasantly surprised actually, because far from it being a bit of a antiquated, clunky, basically a 25-year-old motorbike that was fairly sort of rudimentary at the time in a lot of ways, it's a really refined, well-developed bike, and it stinks of super high quality German engineering. And yeah, okay, these days it might look a bit plain and simple, but everything just feels as tight and as perfect as when it was new, which is incredible. I mean, this bike has been literally around the world and then some. it's almost done the same again as it did in the first instance. It's up to about 30,000 miles on its original speedo. Anyway, this one has been fitted because it was in kilometres, and the current owner fitted a miles per hour one that Brendan actually bought and never got around to fitting. So that's why it's now ticking up its first few miles on this one. But it's absolutely incredible because it's not had any kind of major rebuild or anything like that. It's just been serviced, and that's it. And everything is precise, tight. There's no wobbles or slop or anything like that. And within a mile or two, I was just getting on with riding it. Once got used to the silly indicators, or unusual indicators, I say, because you've got a paddle for each direction, so left and then right, and then a big button here to cancel it, which takes a few moments to get used to, but it sort of makes sense in a way. If you want to go right, you push right. This thing does everything that you would expect from a brand new GS pretty much, apart from the bells and whistles like cruise control and a TFT dash and all that sort of stuff. But the important stuff, the comfort, the kind of ease of use and riding, it's just super serene and easy going, yet confidence inspiring as well. I mean, these tyres on this one, they're a little bit old now and they're getting towards the point of needing replacement, and yet it still develops such a feel of natural mechanical grip. And you get great confidence from that telelever front end and the power lever rear still doing the thing on the original suspension, which has been across rutted, miserable, road-free Russia, you know, and it's still doing the GS stuff. And what would a new GS give me that this one can't? And I've been racking my brains all day, and the answer isn't, the list isn't very long. So okay, you'd have another 40-50 horsepower, so it would go fast if you wanted to, but adventure bikes aren't about going fast. They're about kind of getting places, getting anywhere really, reliably, comfortably, maybe with a pillion, maybe with boxes. And this thing did it all then and will still do it now. And then, as kind of Brendan proved, they're super reliable and they're super simple as well. So if you did need to fix anything, you don't need a diagnostic machine and a qualification in automotive electronics. You can just poke it with a screwdriver and spanners and things. But as far as I gather, Brendan had to do next to nothing. They're a real piece of kind of workmanship. They're a brilliant thing. And it's not surprising when Long Way Round came out and people started going, oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder what they're like. Started trying them, that people bought into them. And since then, the BMW GS has sold pretty much the same amount every year between the two models. And it's just the same people buying them again and again and again. And the reality of it is that there's still nothing that does the job quite like a GS. And at one point that would have pained me. I was a bit anti-GS for a while in my younger years, but I've come to appreciate them and begrudgingly accept that BMW have just got this ability to do something that other manufacturers can't quite replicate. And okay, the Multistrada's a great bike, and Africa Twin and other bikes like that, they've all got their own plus points, and in some ways they are better than the BMW. But as an overall package for touring anywhere with pillions and luggage and all that sort of stuff, I still think that the BMW is the thing to have. And even one this old, I would gladly own this thing. This particular one, even it's barely breaking sweat, and actually this one's probably got the sort of nicest gearbox of any sort of boxer I've tried in a long while. It's funny, it's really smooth to change, but it's also still quite sort of clunky and solid. There's a real sort of chunky, crunchy feel to it despite changing slickly. I guess it's not buttery smooth, it's peanut buttery smooth, crunchy type. Some people get a little bit sick of the press, journalists, whoever, banging on about GSs all the time, but it's hard to do anything else, in all honesty. And even as, like I say, somebody who wasn't always a big fan of them, they just they work. And that little bit of extra that the Adventure had, the big tank and the extra off-road capability, just really made this thing that kind of genuine, around the world, go anywhere machine. And they continue to do that now, and probably will do kind of until we're forced off the road with petrol machines. And yeah, it's the GS, one of the greats, and long may it continue. So the thing with the GS, for me personally, was I always wondered if they were perhaps a little bit overhyped, and particularly the Adventure. I always thought maybe it's too much extra bulk, weight, complexity that people just don't need for toddling around the Cotswolds as we've been doing today. But the answer is that it does deserve the hype. Even one that's, I mean, the basics of this design are getting on for 25 years old now, and it still just works. It was just so right as a formula in the first instance that it still stands the test of time. And it's no surprise really that as Sports Bike Britain was starting to sort of peter out, we were looking for the next thing to kind of get behind, and the next bit of sort of dressing up boxed kind of clothing to sort of get into, that the adventure lifestyle kind of really appealed, because this was obviously at the forefront of that sort of bike at the time, and now even still. And it's really obvious to see why people were instantly smitten with this, kind of sold their GSXRs and bought their sort of beige and sandy coloured outfits and continue to kind of do this to this very day. I mean, you only have to look at the ABR festival just to see what this kind of world and what this lifestyle, this kind of bike kind of gives to people, and particularly in the case of Brendan as well. I mean, obviously we spoke a little bit on camera, but we had a good yarn over a cup of tea for another hour or more after that, and what this bike was able to give him in terms of experience is something that not many other bikes could. Obviously we saw the long way around back in the day, and he did pretty much the same thing but without the support crew and all that sort of stuff, and the bike was just a faithful friend all the way through, and it's a really special machine. Obviously going to be a little bit of contention that we didn't make the 98 R1 perhaps the bike of 1995 through to 2004, or GSXR 1000K1, and a number of other machines from that period that were great, and arguably I would perhaps prefer more myself. But the impact that this bike made and the legacy it continues to have with the current GSs as well is only arguable, even if you don't like the idea yourself. And it's been a pleasure to ride this bike with such a history, so I want to thank Stuart again for letting me out on the bike he's caretaking, and Brendan kind of giving the permission as well. It's been a real pleasure, genuinely. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like below, and we've got 2 more in this series. The next one is Michael Neves with a very special machine from the next decade, and then 1 more from the most recent one. So subscribe if you want to see those when they're coming out soon. Thank you.